Electricast.
Could you even make this movie today?
It feels a little like trauma porn.
Mommy,
Yeah.
while he's raping her. I mean, that is really creepy.
Welcome to episode 203 of Film Generations, where two guys from the 20th century introduce a classic movie to a panel of young film lovers and see if it still plays for today's generation. I'm Mark Netter. I'm a filmmaker, an instructor at the Los Angeles Film School, and co-founder and CEO of Electricast Media.
I'm David Tausick, and I'm wearing my shirt buttoned all the way up in homage to David Lynch.
And I'm Grace. I am an aspiring screenwriter and also a freelance wardrobe stylist.
I'm Jake Flowers. I'm a student at the Los Angeles Film School and a historic costume consultant.
Hi, I'm Guy Lewis. I'm a student at Los Angeles Film School, soon to graduate, and then we'll be searching for a job.
This past week, we watched writer-director David Lynch's 1986 neo-noir Blue Velvet. Starring Kyle MacLachlan, Isabella Rossellini, Dennis Hopper, and Laura Dern, this movie takes us deep into the hidden darkness of American suburbia, but also the almost schizophrenic duality of all of the main characters. So how did our young panel of film lovers feel about the world of David Lynch's Blue Velvet? And it's a very strange world. Let's find out. I know David and I have both seen this movie before. David, did you see it when it was first in theaters?
My girlfriend at the time worked for Dino De Laurentiis, so I got to go to a screening and Kyle MacLachlan was there. So yeah, I saw it early on before it was released.
I saw it in a full theater in New York City and began laughing uncontrollably in the middle after Laura Dern told her monologue about the Robins. Now, for Grace, Jake, and Guy, had any of you seen this movie before?
Not all the way through. I think the first time I put it on, I fell asleep before you even get to the ear. So I really had no idea what it was going to be about. I was just very tired. It wasn't boring or anything.
I hadn't seen it.
And Guy as well?
That's a no for me now.
All right. Had you all heard about it, or was it completely
Yes.
fresh to you?
Yeah, I'd been wanting to watch it for a while.
I've been familiar with the other David Lynch movies, like Dune is my favorite David Lynch movie.
Dune.
Yeah. People didn't like the first Dune. The first Dune was awesome to me. And then
Fascinating.
also the Wild at Heart. Wild at Heart was my other favorite David
It's so
Lynch
good.
movie.
Jake, do you have any favorite David Lynch movies, or is this your first one?
I think Mulholland Drive is my favorite.
Mulholland Drive, that's also
That's a
pretty
good one.
badass.
While I was watching this, I was like going back to the confusing state of mind I was in after I watched Mulholland Drive for the first time with Grace, actually.
Wow.
It's like, I need a narrator. What's happening?
Grace, it sounds like Mulholland Drive was your favorite as well?
No, mine is actually Lost Highway.
Ah.
It's so dark and creepy and so Lynchian. It's amazing.
Lynchian, right? A lot of people have been influenced by David Lynch, and then some of them not for such good reasons, and some have kind of pulled it off, right? Grace, what was your reaction watching Blue Velvet, staying awake this time?
I loved it. I was really happy. I stayed awake and watched the whole thing. It was just so striking, and there's something so surreal about it. It comes straight from like somewhere that I will never be able to access. Like David Lynch is just such an incredible artist to me. And I really loved the mystery, the thrill. I was like about to bite my nails off. It was so good.
I feel like the movie feels kind of normal almost for a half hour.
Yeah, especially in the beginning, those idyllic, like Norman Rockwell almost type shots. Just
Right.
very like Americana.
I really like the ear scene. It reminded me of that movie that we watched, Salvador Dali.
Andalusian Dog?
Andalusian Dog, yeah, there we go. The ear with the ants, and then how they went down to that little angle shot right into the grass. I thought that was dope as fuck.
I also, this time watching it, didn't it remind you a little bit of the beginning of Wild Bunch?
Kinda.
These motifs go from one director to the next.
The influences.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Oh, and then like whenever you have Dennis Hopper in a movie, man, I love that guy. He's bad. He's amazing and everything. Yeah, but it's not my favorite David Lynch movie. No, it's not. But it's good. It's good.
There's so many things in Blue Velvet that remind me of Lynch's other work, especially Twin Peaks. I almost felt like this was like a prequel to Twin Peaks or something, and Jeffrey just changed his name later to Dale Cooper. It was just so incredible how he's able to create this whole other alternate dimension.
Yeah, the seeds of all his later movies are definitely in this one.
Definitely. Yeah, like the lumber, all that.
Right.
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
For me, who kind of saw them in order as they came out, to then go back and see this one after having seen them all was just great, because I was reminded of all the movies that came afterwards and how, he was already onto that with this one.
Yeah.
And there was something I noticed, I don't know what to call them, I guess Lynch walls. No windows, nothing on the walls, dark earth-toned colors. There's walls just like that in Lost Highway and then also in Twin Peaks: The Return, and I'm just like, I don't know why it fascinates me so much. It just seems like you're in a whole nother world.
It was good. It wasn't my favorite of his films. I think it's hard for me with movies that leave me with questions because I want like an ending. I want to know what happens. I want to know why. And with David Lynch, there's so many things left up to the viewer to really decide.
Which I really love. I love
Yeah, it can be amazing, but it can also, for me, be like, I'm not a filmmaker. Like, I can't decide, like you're supposed to tell me what I know,
Well, let's dial to something that you just said, Jake. It did make you feel something, though.
Mm-hmm.
Did it make you feel something different the two different times that you watched it?
Yeah, the first time I was a little disturbed watching it. And then the second time I was really picking up on these voyeuristic themes and the dark underbelly of this like Norman Rockwell-esque town and all of these themes that are things we don't want to see or talk about or think about. But that may be a sick part of us is like curious and interested in, That's what I walked away with the second time viewing it.
This brings up a good point. How much of this is meant to be felt as dream versus reality?
Yeah, it's hard to say because that's like the question for everything David Lynch makes, especially Dreams by Roy Orbison being in the film. I thought that was funny.
Great song, In Dreams. And it kind of revived Roy Orbison's career in the 80s.
Really?
Yeah. Suddenly he was all over the place. He did this whole concert on TV in black and white with Bruce Springsteen, Elvis Costello, and other people that admired him.
And didn't David Lynch direct the music video?
Probably. There's something about that. Well, I do remember at the end of the movie, in the last scene, we come out of Jeffrey's ear. So we finally have a healthy ear at the end of the movie. Coming out of his ear, almost like coming out of his mind, right? And he's waking up outside on a lounge chair of some sort. And he looks up and he sees that crazy Robin. So, I think there's this weird dream aspect to it. I remember when I first saw it, finding the climax, the kind of shootout at the end, to be totally unsatisfactory. And I kind of thought less of the film because of that. Now it doesn't bother me at all, because I think Lynch is kind of saying, like, this doesn't matter. But I don't know if anyone else had the same feeling.
Yeah, I was like, when's he going to shoot him? Like, why is he taking so long to find him in the closet? He's obviously in there,
I think he wasn't really expecting him to be armed, He's like, this stupid little boy, I'm just going to go in there and scare the shit out of him. He wasn't expecting him to fight back, I don't think.
And every time he gets mad, I can't help but laugh because in classic David Lynch style, like the acting is so perfectly dramatic. But when he's like cursing and screaming, I'm like, bro, calm down. It's going to be fine.
Supposedly Lynch could not stop laughing and he had to like bite down on something, maybe Blue Velvet, the whole time where they were shooting that scene.
Oh, it's so funny.
Yeah, I don't know how anyone was quiet while they were filming that.
What's the most disturbing aspect of this movie?
I would have to say the violent sex scene. No brainer. I kind of just like had to clutch the pearls and be like, oh no, this is not normal, behavior for people.
Those didn't really bother me. And at first when Dennis Hopper came in, I was like, oh, this is like his kink. He's going to pay her or something. Like, because she didn't seem to be totally against it, even though you find out later she's basically like his sex slave. But I think what disturbed me most was her family being taken away from her. And when she goes to visit her son, you could tell the son's kind of like mad at her because she says something like, "No, baby, I love you." And like that just broke my heart.
I think thematically it was the sexual violence, but the most disturbing part for me was when they're in the house and she's butt naked and the two women are now facing each other and there's this like dramatic crying scene. It was really hard for me to watch her face like crumple up and so upset. I was like,
how did she do
You mean
that?
Sandy, the Laura Dern
Laura
character?
Dern.
Sandy, I was like, girl.
Yeah, Grace is doing a great job. I will tell you, one of the other times when I laughed uncontrollably in the movie, the first time I saw it, was when they cut to her face and she's got that grimace.
Yeah. I was like, there's no sound coming out. What's happening?
Yeah, that was disturbing.
Dennis Hopper, I mean, he's really creepy when he starts like going on about mommy while he's raping her. I mean, that is really creepy.
Baby wants to.
All week I was like fighting the urge to say that out loud at work.
I try to default to Daddy Wants Blue Velvet. That's the one that I default to when I can.
Or the other funny one is when they're at Ben's house and he's like, I'll laugh anything that moves. I was like, who are you talking to?
I liked when he just walked right in. He's like, "It's Daddy, shithead." Like right away, I was like, "Oh, okay, this is where this is going."
Okay, so I'll tell you that this time watching it for me, the sexual violence, the whole Frank scene, I found so disturbing. And one question I have is, could you even make this movie today?
It feels a little like trauma porn, and people would have a problem with unnecessary sexual violence being portrayed in films is something I hear people talk about a lot now. I remember watching movies when I was younger and there being like assault scenes and me being like, what? You know, and I don't really see that so much anymore, as often at least. So I wonder if like this just wouldn't fly at all.
I don't know. What does everybody else think?
Yeah, that's hard to say. Probably like a watered down version of it, but I mean, they don't even show like penetration. He doesn't get naked or anything. It's kind of like questionable what he actually does to her. So I think they would have to just water it down even more. Not that it was watered down, but there was something strangely like PG about it, even though it was very obscene. I think that just is part of like the duality theme.
It might have something to do with David Lynch. Every third word in the script for that middle section is fuck. But apparently David Lynch can't say that word. So even on the set, he'd like tell Dennis Hopper, like, and then when you say that word, and he'd point to it, like he wouldn't say it. And so I think there's something like so wholesome and clean cut about him, even though he's obviously capable of making a movie like this. He's a funny character.
He's a little freak.
He is. Wasn't he having an affair with the woman who played Dorothy?
Isabella?
Yeah, Isabella.
I don't know if he did during, but afterwards.
It was afterwards.
And she was also married to Martin Scorsese for a while, too.
Oh.
And like the fact that he can't say the word fuck and then this weird like mommy kink is making me think that maybe he's like wants to be infantilized or something. But that's for another podcast.
Well, maybe it's for this podcast, though, because what is this movie about?
That's a good one, because
I think it's about a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's about the underbelly of like this Americana idealistic town.
Definitely. And it's pretty in your face, like in the beginning when it goes down under the grass. It's like, this is where we're going. You see all the bugs.
But I think it's also about like tapping into like a dark sexual energy and voyeurism and like walking the line between what is and isn't okay.
Let me ask a question. Do you think that Jeffrey is a virgin before the movie starts?
No.
I don't think so.
He's like a college student. I think maybe he's like done some things, but never anything as like freaky as this, you know?
Well, I don't know. So that's a great question, right? So like he never tried anything with Laura Dern, right?
Well, he kissed her.
Okay, but that whole thing, let's talk about that for a second. So the whole Laura Dern thing that's so fascinating to me, this is definitely a movie of light and dark. It's the good witch, the bad witch. You know, he's obsessed with Wizard of Oz, and Isabella Rossellini's named Dorothy. There's a man in the yellow suit, which is kind of like the Yellow Brick Road.
Oh my God.
I'm blowing Jake's mind right now.
Yeah. I'm a dumbass.
yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, he's out there. Yeah.
One of the most amazing shots to me is when Laura Dern comes out of the shadows.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
And she's glowing.
I thought that shot was like an exact copy of Kim Novak appearing in Vertigo.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, a good call on that. Really good call. But it really is kind of like a virgin horror kind of thing, right? You know, that whole dichotomy
Makes
of like,
sense.
here's the sexual woman who's into all kinds of stuff, and she's even a masochist and, you know, little nutty. One of my favorite lines in the whole movie is, I looked for you in the closet tonight.
Yeah.
People have said that to me before.
You know, people have talked about all the perversion in, you talk about all the perversion in Blue Velvet, but one perversion I don't hear people talk about a lot is fetishism. And I think the movie deals a lot in that. You know, Vertigo is about fetishism, right? Mm-hmm. I always thought of Blue Velvet, the song, as being like a fetish song. You know, she wore blue velvet. Whoa. You know, like, who cares?
Well, when you sing it like that.
Well,
How else
that's
do
the
you
way the
sing
song
it?
is actually sung. It's, you know, the song is about like how exciting it is. Like she's wearing this cloth. And, you know, Dennis Hopper has a piece of blue velvet, I think, and that he fondles.
Even in the club, he's fondling the blue velvet while he listens to her
Right.
sing Blue Velvet.
So I just always wondered if that's why this song fits into, because, you know, there's no real reason for it to be called Blue Velvet except this, you know, kind of corny 50s song, very American. But if you think about it, there's something a little dark in there.
It's like, why are
And
you
that's
so
sort of what the movie's
excited?
about. Right.
The fetishism wouldn't be as perverse or as creepy if it wasn't like born out of this era of like sexual repression that's happening. And like the whole mommy son dynamic, I guess, is fetish. But I think to what you were asking, Mark, is do we think that the main character was a virgin or virginal in some ways? And I think that's what made it a little bit more disturbing for me, is that his character is extremely virginal and naive. And then he's suddenly exposed to this really dark sexual fantasy. And it's like, whoa, you know, it's like kind of hard to watch, like where as if he wasn't, or we knew more about him and that he was also like into some stuff, then it would be less creepy.
But he does get into it, doesn't he? I mean, he becomes pretty perverted,
Kinky.
you know, kinky. Yeah.
He hits her.
He hits her.
Yeah, second time that she asks him, second scene when she asks him, it takes a while. He doesn't want to do it. And then he's kind of broken afterwards, right? He's in his bed at home, little boy.
Yeah, but, you know, is he broken because he did something he didn't want to do, or is he broken because he did something and found out he really liked it?
I think that's what it
that-
is.
I don't know. I don't agree.
I don't know either.
Yeah,
I'm thinking that the three of you are perverts and Guy and I are
And
well
whoa,
adjusted.
Those are
Definitely.
obviously.
We're definitely perverts.
what about it?
Wait, I don't know if you're a detective or a pervert. Isn't that her line?
yeah, exactly. And he's finding that about himself too. He's like, yeah, do I want to help this woman because I want to be a good guy, or do I want to help her because she's so hot, you know?
Yeah, he keeps going back.
Yeah, and I think he's like super confused when she's got the knife out, but he's like
Turned
horny.
on. Yeah.
And it's a trope. You know, he really likes the wholesome girl, but he also really likes the very unwholesome girl, a woman.
Black Lodge and the White Lodge.
Oh, there we go, Twin Peaks.
Exactly.
One of the other things is the idea that it's a coming-of-age sexuality story. It's about learning what real sexuality is, a grown-up adult sexuality. And guess what? It's a little scary. And you find out
exciting.
things about yourself that, yeah, right? I mean, does that ring true to you guys? That is, in a sense, you could almost see Frank. Now, this is going a little far, but this time I was thinking about it. Is Frank a projection of Jeffrey's unconscious in some fashion?
Could
I
be.
think if you agree that he was kind of into the danger of the sex, and that there is something that's like in him that wants to take advantage of her, and that's like scaring him. So yeah, I do think that Frank's a projection of the darkness in him.
What do you guys feel about the huge shifts in Isabella Rossellini's character as Dorothy?
I think she's in a really awful position and she feels helpless and confused, but also seeking affection from someone who's not gonna call her mommy. So I can imagine someone just being just totally all over the place like that when their family's been kidnapped from them.
Mm-hmm.
The last shot is slow motion of her child running into her arms. And now we see her as a mother. After this whole movie where she's been a sex object and a crazy object and an object of pity, you see her as a mother, and her performance, I think, is incredible in this movie. I mean, I was actually moved this time watching it. Like that shot, for some reason, I felt like, thank God.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
I think it made me think about how she could simultaneously be all three of those things.
Exactly.
Like, unwell,
babies are made.
also a sexual being, and like a wholesome mother, you know?
Exactly.
And when I saw her, I was like, bad bitch, you know? She went through all that and she's still taking care of business, you know?
Yeah, people are sexual beings, and then once a child is there, people like just automatically assume that these sexual beings just kind of like vanish, but they don't, right? You know, they are still there. You know, I agree with Jake. You know, she's all those things, and none of those things are wrong because of the other. You know what I'm trying to say?
Exactly.
How would you guys rate Frank Booth, played by Dennis Hopper, as a movie villain? Scale of 1 to 10.
Well, I'll give him a 9. He's definitely villainous, but at times I felt like a little bored with the character. Not how he was playing it, but just like the character just like, okay, he's just a bad, stupid, obnoxious guy. That's it. I just wanted something a little different to show like a different side of him, but he's definitely a good movie villain. It just seemed at times like, why doesn't somebody just punch this guy out? Like, what? Why is he allowed to just be like this?
But Jeffrey tries, right? Jeffrey punches him in the car.
Yeah.
That he's like a simpleton is like what makes it, you know, like we don't need a backstory for him because he's just like a dum-dum, you know? And
Very
like
true.
him, the wailing and crying and like dramatic cursing and the way that his minions just kind of like do whatever he wants just kind of played into the fact that he's like actually really just sad and stupid, you know?
Yeah.
So I think I would give him a 9 too.
I'd give him a 9 too. The first scene with him and Isabella Rossellini, Dorothy, he is so real. It's absurd, really, but he plays it so absolutely truly. You honestly believe every second that he's, you know, in fact, I think it's a very, very courageous performance by him.
Oh, yeah. I heard that the studio didn't want to work with him because he had such a terrible reputation, and he told David Lynch, he's like, I gotta play Frank because I am Frank. Like, let me play this. And David was like, well, that's good and bad news.
I don't really feel that he's like a top tier villain. I'm a big fan of villains. He didn't really have like an ulterior motive or other than just to be chaotic, and he was like fucked up, you know, on drugs and stuff. The guy that was scarier to me was the guy that
Ben?
Ben, yeah, it was Ben, yeah. So
yeah, there was something really chilling.
Ben
about
was
him.
really scary. He was like, I thought Ben was gonna have a more
He's so
sinister,
fucking suave.
Yeah, and see that's the thing. You know what I'm saying? He was very calm, relaxed and chill and in control with all this chaos going around. And he felt like he was at home. I thought he was gonna be like a bigger bad guy, you
the
know.
boss. I loved
The
that.
vibe I got from Ben is that they were like squatting at his pad, that he was trying to like do a little performance, be his queenie self, do some drugs, drink, and he cuts off his song, and you could see in his face he's like, really, bitch?
I know.
It's sort of like the Casbah in the old movies where they're all such total career criminals that
it makes it extra creepy that there's these older women there, knowing that there's a child being held hostage, basically, and it's like, what does he have over these women that they're not protecting the child?
Yeah, and you never go into the back room. You kind of see a little bit of the back room, but you can't really see who's in there or anything like that. It's really creepy.
I was really obsessed with that scene for some reason. I just
too,
like wanted to be in that room. I was like, I need to know who these ladies are, what they're wearing, like why do they like Ben so much?
Well, how about how Ben turns out to be an asshole? Like he goes over and punches Jeffrey in the stomach, just kind of like to put on a show for Frank or something.
Yeah, he's like wants Frank to like him, I think. Or maybe there's some weird homoerotic tension between them. And like when he was singing and Frank was like mouthing the words, I was like, they are in love. What do you mean? You know what I mean?
Plus, he's putting drugs into Frank's mouth. He's not giving it to Frank to put in, right? He's like, Frank opens his mouth and he puts it in.
And he lets it happen.
When Ben lip syncs to In Dreams, the Roy Orbison tune, instead of a microphone, he's using a work light. And that's why he gets the light on his face.
It looks
which is
so cool.
Well, because he also has the white grease paint.
Yeah.
Evidently, that came from Dean Stockwell, who's been working since the 1940s or 50s.
Yeah, he was a child actor.
Yeah, Boy with the Green Hair. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that movie, but he became a star at a very young age. And he was evidently just screwing around on the set while they were setting up, and he grabbed the work light and started playing with it. And David Lynch goes, that's it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, David Lynch says he's been asked, does he improvise because there's so much weird stuff that goes on. And he says, never improvise. But if some great idea comes up, then you have to use it.
Yeah, I heard earlier today that originally when Frank was like inhaling whatever he's inhaling, nitrous or something.
Oh, we haven't even talked about that yet. And that's like such a huge thing.
But David Lynch originally wrote that he was inhaling helium, which doesn't get you high. It just changes your voice. So like during the like sex scene or whatever, he would inhale and be like, baby wants to fuck. So he'd have like an even higher voice. But Dennis Hopper being like the crazy like drug addict he was like, no one would be inhaling helium. Like it's going to be like amyl nitrate or nitrous or something. And David Lynch was like, well, I'm glad you know that.
That's so interesting.
Every time I watch the movie, when he pulls it out the first time, I'm just like, oh shit, I forgot. And we are so on. And then when he does it in the car later,
he's like huffing NOS.
Yeah, and they
or
never
something.
address
like,
it. Yeah.
That car's going to blow up. For some reason, something that disturbed me, speaking of the car, was, well, I noticed this when I watched it the second time. When Dorothy's in the car and they're out kicking his ass, is the chick in the yellow that gets out and gets on top of the hood and she's like, I was like
my
that would
favorite
be me
part.
Yeah, so and that gave me like ex-stripper, ex-hooker vibes. You know what I'm saying? It was like, what else is she supposed to be there for?
Yeah.
Why else is she on that trip? To specifically dance on top of a car.
Yes,
That's her job.
So funny.
it was kind of an improv. She was like a local and she could dance, I guess. And David was like, okay, you're going to get on top of the car.
That's so funny.
That is so awesome.
It was so amazing. But I saw a deleted scene right before they go into that scene where he gets his ass beat. They go into like a bar or something, and this big woman is topless, and she lights her nipples on fire. And I'm like, why did they keep that in there?
That would have gone too far.
John Waters.
Yeah, I thought so too.
I love that.
Okay, we talked a little bit about this before. What is the meaning of Blue Velvet in the movie? The song, the curtain we see at the beginning and end, the dress she wears, the fetishization of the piece that's cut off, the fact that it's in people's mouths at various points.
In the early 1900s, when evening gowns are being made in velvet, it was to reflect candlelight. It silhouetted the body, which was extremely sensual. Whereas before in the 1890s, women were corseted and then they had a bustle and they had all of these things covering their natural shape. And the velvet was meant to highlight the natural shape of their breast and their legs. And so it was really seen as hypersexual, even though it's a really dense, thick fabric that completely covers the skin. So I was thinking about that and the fact that she's wearing such a beautiful velvet dress on the stage.
David Lynch seems obsessed with velvet curtains.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
all his movies have velvet. Too. I mean, starting with Eraserhead, even Elephant Man has curtains. And Twin Peaks is just filled with curtains. There's a whole room that's just nothing but a curtained room.
Black Lodge.
The Red Room. Did you notice the shots that the camera at Dorothy's place sometimes would pan to her window and you'd see the breeze coming through the red velvet curtain? I think they were red velvet curtains.
They were.
He's very, very involved in the production design of his movies. Not just writing and shooting them, but he's very involved in choosing all the props.
And he's super crafty, too.
Yeah, he's an artist.
Well, he's always making props for the movies, and they were trying to use trained robins for the robin scene at the end, the two different robin shots. And you can't train robins, so it wasn't working. evidently somebody found a dead robin, and Lynch was great, and he rigged it up with wires. So the very last scene with the robin, where it's on the windowsill with a real live bug in its mouth, Lynch evidently was down under the window moving the wires and saying to the cameraman, "How does it look?"
I love that.
Didn't he stuff it like he had a taxidermy hobby or something? I thought I heard something about that a while
I don't know
ago.
about that, but I know that everyone has been wondering how he did the baby in Eraserhead. What is that baby made out of?
Right.
Because it's...
All he's ever said is, "I can't tell you, but the problem was it kept dying on us." But I don't know if he's bullshitting. But going back to the robin is obviously some combination of real and stuffed or mechanical. Why end with the robin? And how does that relate to her story about the robins? Sandy, Laura Dern's character, has a dream about robins, and that when the robins would come, it would bring love, I think is...
Love and light.
I mean, did the robin look artificial at the end to you guys?
Yeah, I could tell it was fake or stuff.
But that like added to it.
Yeah,
you
it
know?
did.
I heard when a robin shows up, it means like that your loved one is coming to visit you from beyond the grave
Wow.
or something like that.
I think it just adds to like the duality, like good versus evil, like the robin devouring the bug. Just it's showing that like good prevailed.
And that there's also like darkness in nature, you know?
Yes.
And that it's like part of our natural state to have this like dark part of our mind.
It bookends the movie too, right? You start with the fireman and the red roses and the beautiful suburb. Then you go down into the ear, and after that it gets darker and darker and darker. So at the end, you mentioned you come back out of the ear. So then you've got to go back to images, robins and singing.
Right, you see the fire engine again. So we've talked about two things that are really important. One is this dark underbelly of suburbia. Question that I would have for everybody is, could this movie take place in any country with a suburb, or is it distinctly American?
I think it's distinctly American for sure.
I don't know. It could be European too, though. I mean, like Britain, you can still find that kind of underbelly of life out, everywhere, because it's everywhere, right?
There's sexual repression as part of our culture, and where that might not translate so much in Europe, and that there's like less taboo around sexuality and nudity and things like that.
Maybe it could happen in Europe, but I agree with Jake that Europe tends to be more like open to sexuality. There isn't like this sense of repression around it.
David, do you have any strong feelings on that?
I'm a little influenced by the fact that I know by David Lynch himself and some of his other work, because he tries to look like a Boy Scout, and he's obviously not a Boy Scout, but he really projects that image. He loves that image, and I think he loves that dichotomy. So because he's American, I think the film is about an American version of that. I mean, every country has its own version of that. Wherever you go, whatever you see, you get a sense that there's something under the surface that's not supposed to be there, which is what a lot of his films are about.
I agree with Guy a bit that could do something similar in other places. I also feel like when you're at Dorothy's, like when you start climbing those stairs, notice the elevator's out, so he always has to take the stairs. So it really is like a journey, right? I feel like he's in Europe when he's at Dorothy's place. She's speaking with an accent, almost seems Eastern European, even though I think her mother was Swedish, her father was Italian. Her father was a great director, Roberto Rossellini. Her father and mother had an affair while her mother was still married to Dr. Lindstrom back in Sweden, and had daughter Pia Lindstrom, who later was an NBC News anchor. And for about 5 years, I think it was, David, that she was not allowed to make movies in America because the tabloids were all like, she's a wanton woman who left her husband and daughter, and had Isabella Rossellini.
I mean, Isabella Rossellini is so courageous. Besides the fact that she does such a great job, the courage to play the role as fully as she did is amazing. And she got really punished for it. Her agency dropped her as soon as they saw the film. And she had a burgeoning career going, and this film almost killed it.
Yeah.
That's awful. I read that she was nervous for the role, not for like the nudity or the vulnerability, but for the singing, because she wasn't like a very strong singer. And they brought Angelo Badalamenti on to arrange something for her voice. And this was actually the first time him and David Lynch worked together.
My God, he just died like a year and a half ago, I think, right? So sad. And you have all those themes like the falling, which shows up in Twin Peaks, and that song Memory of Love. Whenever Jeffrey and Sandy are kissing, it's always what that song is playing, and it's an Angela Badalamenti song. And she goes from singing Blue Velvet, which is a classic, to singing this song Blue Star the first time we see her in the Slow Club. And the Blue Star was written for her by Badalamenti. That's the one I think you're thinking of.
Wow.
Okay.
We're kind of hitting the big themes. Suburbia, obviously, this sexual awakening, development, becoming a man, whatever it might be. And then the other thing I do think is it is sort of a look at the 1950s through a weird prism. When you see Sandy and Jeffrey in the soda shop, they're drinking malts and, it's all very fit. He's picking her up in front of school. She's got her hair kind of like, like a Bobby Soxer.
Sandy from Grease.
Yeah, that's what I kept thinking. Sandy in Grease.
Yeah. So I was born, I think probably about 13 years after Lynch or something like that. And I was in a small town in upstate New York, which was, a bedroom community for Albany, a lot of professionals, a quote unquote nice place to grow up. But then, there would be like the cocktail lounge, which you couldn't see into because there was no windows in front. And who went to the cocktail lounge? What was a cocktail lounge? It was really from the 50s, even though I was living in the 60s. But it felt like this weird grown-up thing that was kind of mysterious and odd. Or you'd go to the bowling alley and, the bowling alley would have a bar and it would have a cigarette machine that all the kids would try to get cigarettes out of while people weren't looking, so that we could go smoke and stuff like that. So some of the stuff that we'd find out when I was a kid was like, oh my God, the local Boy Scout leader, turns out he was a pedophile.
Of course.
Yeah, I grew up in a really different place, but I think everybody must go through that kind of thing where you're a kid and you start noticing the adult world around you. But I think in Lynch's case, he grew up in towns like yours. He grew up in, Missoula, Montana, and Spokane, Washington, places like that.
And then in high school, he was in Virginia, and his best friend was Jack Fisk, the great production designer and husband of Sissy Spacek, who is up for an Oscar for Killers of the Flower Moon. He's one of the greatest production designers, did Badlands, There Will Be Blood. And one night when they were, screwing around in their town, they saw a naked lady walk out into the street. And so Blue Velvet, that scene where Dorothy walks out naked, that's out of David Lynch's life.
And she had blood on her mouth. Lynch says the image really stayed with him. They never found out why she was naked, why she had blood in her mouth. She just kept going. But that scene was definitely the inspiration for this scene in Blue Velvet.
Yeah. I mean, things used to be different. They used to not tell kids when somebody died. We wouldn't have them see the body or go to the funeral. People couldn't get closure, because there was this weird thing about these two different worlds. When they screened the movie, the studio execs were freaked out at MGM, but Dino De Laurentiis had the right to release it. And evidently after the internal screening, Dino said, I don't understand it, but we're going to release it just as it is. It'll be controversial. That'll be good. And they put it out. And Guy, I think you had the reception. Is that right?
Yeah, it did 8 million opening weekend. It did almost 800,000, but a lot of the audience was split. There were people asking for refunds. There were a lot of walkouts. As you can imagine, people in the 80s, how disturbed they would have been seeing this movie. Some people loved it. Some people didn't understand it, but a lot of people were just uncomfortable with the subject matter.
I do know Woody Allen called it the best movie of the 80s. So, Grace, you brought up Dennis Hopper and as Frank Booth. By the way, did anyone catch that Dorothy lives on Lincoln?
Yes, I did. And he's Booth. Yeah, John Wilkes Booth. I was like,
There's this whole theory that the movie's about the assassination of Lincoln. I think it's going a little far.
Yeah, that's a stretch, maybe. But yes, I did a bunch of research on Dennis Hopper. He really fascinated me. I ended up buying his biography. I can't wait to come in the mail.
Oh, tell me how it is.
I will, yeah. He is a very crazy guy. He was nicknamed Hollywood's OG Hellraiser, and he ran away from home at a very young age to join a Shakespearean theater troupe. And he was born in 1936, which I thought was just crazy because you don't think people born back then would be like such badasses. I don't know. I mean, they're badass in their own way, but he's like a hellraiser. He also worked with James Dean on Rebel Without a Cause, and then they became friends and they did peyote together.
Wow.
And yeah.
As one does.
I want to do peyote with James Dean.
I know. It makes me think what else they were doing anyway. Hopper gained a reputation for being a very bad boy, and he was like eventually blacklisted in the 60s. And then he got the chance to direct this small, like, artsy film, Easy Rider, which he starred in as well, and they made it for only $400,000, and it grossed over $4 million, so that kind of, like, brought his career back, and it became this amazing cultural moment, like, that really captured the zeitgeist.
I'm duty-bound to mention that my partner at Electric House, co-founder Peter Rafelson's father, produced that movie, Easy Rider.
Wow, that's amazing.
Wow, that's awesome.
I have the soundtrack on vinyl, but I've still never seen the movie. Maybe I'll do that tonight. I'm on my Dennis Hopper kick.
It's on my list.
Yeah, totally revolutionized Hollywood. It brought like the counterculture to the mainstream. And also John Wayne said like he'd like to kill him, basically. He called him like commie scum or something. Jack Nicholson, Hopper, and Fonda were spending a lot of time at the headquarters of the production company, and they were just doing acid, doing blow, doing all kinds of drugs, and they found this urn. For some reason, they thought it was a good idea to snort some of this dead woman's ashes while they were looking for cocaine. So they all snorted a dead lady. And also, he shot a tree while he was on acid. He thought it was a giant grizzly bear.
At least he didn't shoot his wife like William Burroughs did.
Well, he wasn't very kind to women either. He married Michelle Phillips from the Mamas and the Papas, and then 8 days later, she was trying to leave, and Dennis Hopper drove onto the tarmac and blocked her plane so she couldn't fly away from him. And then they divorced.
What a psycho.
And then another wife, he like kicked her windshield, and he got on top of the car and was like kicking and punching the roof.
I guess he was Frank Booth.
Yeah, he said he was.
Blue Velvet was a comeback for him because he was cleaning up his act. He directed
he was sober.
a few movies. Yeah. And he was also a great photographer. There's been exhibits of his stuff around LA at times.
I loved him in Speed. I mean, like a lot of people.
Yes, I forgot he was in Speed. That was like my favorite movie when I was little.
Speed was badass. You know what I'm saying? It was really great.
I love that movie.
And see, that villain was one of my favorite villains.
Yeah, mad scientist.
He had a goal. He had a point. He had a reason to be evil and funny. You know, pop quiz, hot shot. I mean, come on.
No, he's a great villain. And David, you may remember when the Oscars came around the year after Blue Velvet, I think Lynch got nominated for Best Director. Mm-hmm. And Hopper gets nominated for a completely different movie, Hoosiers, where he plays an alcoholic dad or something. Yep. And all of us were like, he didn't get nominated for Blue Velvet?
I know. He was much better in Blue Velvet than Hoosiers. But Hoosiers was it's amazing that Blue Velvet even got all those Oscar nominations. I mean, that's... usually the Academy isn't that hip.
David, did you want to do anything on Lynch's career?
He decided he wanted to be a painter when he lived in Alexandria, Virginia. And he went to Boston and then to Salzburg, Germany, and he hated both places. He just found them incredibly uninspiring. So he went to Philadelphia, and Philadelphia was so crime-ridden at the time and so impoverished. He was able to buy a 12-room house for $3,500 in the center of Philadelphia, which even today, that's like $30,000, just to give you a point of reference. Philadelphia completely inspired him and inspired all his short films like Six Men Getting Sick and The Amputee, and it inspired Eraserhead, which I urge anyone listening who hasn't seen Eraserhead, who has the stomach for it, to check it out. It's an amazing movie. I saw Eraserhead at the Waverly Theater on 6th Avenue and 3rd Street in New York. In 1968, they premiered Night of the Living Dead there, and it became the midnight movie for years. And then there was El Topo, and then Pink Flamingos, The Harder They Come. And then in 1976, the Waverly became the first theater to show the Rocky Horror Picture Show at midnight and remained the midnight show every night until Eraserhead knocked it out in 1978. There was a theater in LA that also showed it every night. These midnight showings of Eraserhead at these sort of marginal theaters really got him known. And that's how he got The Elephant Man. Somebody saw it and said to Mel Brooks, who was starting his own production company, "You should hire this director, David Lynch. He's really talented." And Mel Brooks said, "Well, let me see this movie, Eraserhead." At which point Lynch said, "Okay, I'm not getting the job," clearly. And he's like standing outside. He can't even bear to go in and watch Mel Brooks watch this movie. And Mel Brooks comes out of Eraserhead and runs up to Lynch and says, "You're a madman. I love you." And he hires him to do The Elephant Man, which gets nominated for Oscars and huge instant success at a very young age. That gets him Dune, which is a really big budget movie. He didn't make that many movies. He made like 9 movies, 9 feature films. For a while, it seemed like we were going to see a lot of David Lynch. You know, in around 1990, he did Wild at Heart, which won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. And then Twin Peaks came out the next year, and then the Twin Peaks movie. And he was really being prolific, but since then he's only made 4 movies. He does a lot of weird little projects.
I like his music.
He did a cartoon in the LA Reader for 12 years called The Angriest Dog in the World, which was the same 4 panels every day. But at the end, there'd be a different dialogue bubble. And a similar kind of thing with The Weather Report, which he's been doing in LA now for, I think, 18 years.
Well, he stopped a year ago.
He did stop, you're right. He stopped
But it would be every morning at like 7:30.
Yeah, he would do the weather report. And of course, in LA, the weather doesn't change very much.
On YouTube.
So he'd go on, he'd say, "Today, golden sunshines." And
And then the number of the day.
"Have a great day." And the number, and then he'd talk about the song he's been thinking of. He's got his own brand of coffee. He does a lot of projects. Apparently, he's a workaholic, but he's turning out a lot of very, very small projects. And I think one great thing about him is he's never cared about awards or about money very much, I don't think.
He bought his place up on Mulholland, then he bought the place next door. And so one's the home, one's the studio. By the way, about a week ago, his 3rd wife filed for divorce.
Oh, I didn't know that yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Breaking news.
Yeah.
Can't
He
stand
does
his
have-
ass.
You know, I think he's married
Can't
to his
stand his
work.
goddamn weather reports.
Well, it says he always works. And he said he wanted to lead the art life and he didn't want anything to interfere with that. And so if you're going to be with him, you got to be okay being number 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think Eraserhead might be based on the experience of he and his wife reluctantly, accidentally had a daughter. And he was a very reluctant husband as well as dad. And I think Jennifer Lynch, his daughter, had a club foot and was wrapped in bandages when she was an infant.
Oh, my God.
And so that tells you something about Eraserhead.
The eraser baby is Jennifer Lynch.
Yeah.
He's like, "Get rid of it." Jeez.
Well,
Yeah, I didn't like Razorhead.
you didn't like it.
I fell asleep.
Yeah, it was kind of I mean,
Well, I did fall asleep the first time when I saw it in college at midnight. Around 1:30, I was out. 1 o'clock, maybe. I was like,
I was enthralled by it. I love the movie, but I cannot tell you what the lady with the fake cheeks stepping on the worms is about at all. No idea.
I kind of love that movie too. You know, Stanley Kubrick used to make everybody watch Eraserhead. It was his favorite movie.
Yeah.
I heard it was David Bowie's favorite movie too.
Oh, makes sense. Did anyone catch the kind of Hitchcock feel of Blue Velvet?
Yes.
Yeah. I
Absolutely.
mentioned Vertigo, right? And there's other Hitchcock elements to it too.
Well, when he's in the closet, isn't it a little bit like Norman Bates looking through the wall of the motel?
Yes, that's exactly what I thought. I was like, oh God, we're going back.
real subtle. Yeah.
And by the way, the last thing we've seen from David Lynch was on Showtime, and it was Twin Peaks: The Return, 18 episodes. So good, kind of weird, but episode 8 is like legendary.
Which one was episode 8?
The atomic bomb one.
Oh, yeah. That's the one with the room I was talking about, the Lynch walls.
Black and white. Yeah.
Yeah, that was so crazy. It was incredible. I want to rewatch that whole series now.
Yeah.
Probably the most important thing I could have said about Lynch, which I didn't say, is that he is really, really, really an auteur. He controls so much of his films, his soundtracks alone. And first of all, the music. He's very involved in music, but also just the sound design. All his movies have a very elaborate sound design, which he's very involved in creating. Of course, he had great collaborators like Alan Splett to help him do that. He makes props. He gets really, really great performances out of his actors. And he really gives the actors time. He never rushes the performances along. So the camera will just sit there with the actors. But I don't find his movies to be slow, other than maybe Inland Empire. That's really slow. But
the scene where Jeffrey sneaks into Dorothy's and then Frank shows up, does anyone know how long that runs? Yeah.
It seems long. It's like 20 minutes or something, or I don't know. Or
20 minutes
longer.
long.
I don't know. 20 minutes long, yeah.
It's a 20-minute scene.
It did not seem that long to me.
Jesus. It felt like 5.
Because you're scared.
Yeah.
Right. And nowadays, no one, I mean, that's rare. Very few directors will do a 20-minute scene. Everything's so fast now.
There's this interview with David Lynch. I don't know the context or anything. I just saw like a picture of it, and he's like, "Who gives a hoot however long a scene is," or something.
He's a great character. So for anyone who's interested in him or his movies, you can just watch a few interviews on YouTube, and right away you'll get his rap. He does the same rap every time. He's a performer.
There's a great biography of him that's really unusual. It's called Room to Dream. And each chapter is about another one of his movies or projects, right? Followed by him writing a chapter in response to the chapter written by the biographer.
That's dope. That's cool as hell. What's the name of that book?
Room to Dream. And I hear the audiobook, you get to hear his voice.
Ooh.
I loved reading it because I could just go back and forth, and there's pictures, and this is like an amazing American artist. And the other thing about Lynch, there's a whole surrealist art movement. We saw the Salvador Dali, Louis Buñuel films, Andalusian Dog, as Guy mentioned last season. And that whole group, world famous, paintings that are worth lots of money now, right? But if you look at in their lifetime, David Lynch is the most successful surrealist of all time. And he really is the grandson of Louis Buñuel and Salvador Dali. I mean, in kind of emotional terms.
Yeah.
Are we ready to do our end of show ratings and recommendations?
Yeah.
Let's
All right.
do it.
Yes.
I'm going to start with Jake on this one. Where would you place Blue Velvet, and who would you recommend it to, if anybody?
I would recommend this film to all film students. And I think I would recommend this to people who love thrillers and horror films. I would love to see the reaction of people who are really into horror and the history of horror films, and see where this film kind of fits in there for them. And I think I would give this movie a 3.
Guy, what about you?
It was very interesting. It's very cool. Again, this isn't my favorite David Lynch movie, but there's some things in here that were pretty cool. Like the gangster scenes were all nice. The weird scenes with the random people that just shows up in this movie were very interesting. So yeah, I mean, just watch all movies, but this one was pretty cool. But I 3 stars.
Big 3. Grace, what about you?
I would recommend this movie to anybody, especially a normie, to shake them up a bit. And I would give it 4 stars. I really loved it. I love being in David Lynch's universe. I feel like everything's sort of connected in a way, and I love how he puts it on us to figure everything out. I like how he doesn't spoon feed anything. He assumes his audience is intelligent, which I really enjoy.
And would you say that you are not a normie?
I don't think I'm a normie.
No, not a normie.
Okay, David, how about you?
I'm going to give it 3.5. My favorite Lynch film is probably Mulholland Drive. This is right behind it. But, a lot of them are close. I love Fire Walk With Me, actually, the Twin Peaks movie.
Me too.
Which a lot of people, yeah. I mean, if somebody loves this movie, I know I'm going to like them. Pretty much, guaranteed. So I would recommend it to anybody that can appreciate it. And I'd also recommend it to all the people that can't, because I think that they should have this inflicted on them and try to open up their minds a little bit.
I agree.
Another vote for inflicting it on the normies.
That's right.
So I kind of would recommend this film for adventurous film lovers, people that can handle non-normie movies. I don't know that I would necessarily inflict it on normies. I think that, who knows, it could convert people. For me, the visual aesthetic gets better with Mulholland Drive. Like, I think this movie is shot almost normal for about 2/3 of the first half hour, which I think is good for setup and all that. But Mulholland Drive visually to me feels like it's at a higher level. Maybe it's the darkness, maybe it's Hollywood, a little more chiaroscuro. That said, though, this movie's been so influential. If you talk about movies that have been influential on film students, it's this and then it's Pulp Fiction. And you just see the damage. Because I've been in film school and I know people that have tried to do the Lynch thing, and, it's sometimes pathetic. But it's just a huge influence. The fact that we even use the term Lynchian, like we would say Hitchcockian, that kind of shows you what it means. So I think it's a landmark movie in a sense, and an unexpected landmark movie. So to me, it's a 3.5-star movie. And it especially felt that way watching it this time. I would have thought I could potentially drop down to a 3 because I keep worrying that I'm overpraising movies on this podcast.
Me too.
And overrating.
We're sweethearts. We're sweethearts to movies here.
I know. But we're also picking movies. Dave and I are picking movies that we don't want to, fail, at least.
These are good movies. These are good movies.
Yeah.
We average on 3.5 stars. 3.4, so we go up. So 3.5.
Listen, I'm really glad to have the three of you back here joining me and David. I know our lineup changes based on availability for everybody, but this is the OG team. We were the Midnight Cowboy team. Midnight Cowboy seems to be back in the discourse again. People are talking about the documentary that came out recently about it, and so I'm really happy about what we're doing with Film Generations over here. If you want to watch Blue Velvet, it is streaming for free with a Showtime subscription and available to rent on Apple TV, Amazon, YouTube, and Vudu, and it often shows up on TCM and Max. Speaking of YouTube, that's where you can find Film Generations with clips and stills, and you can listen to it just on audio wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. If you like the show, will you please rate or review it, tell your friends, and help others to find it? Film Generations is an Electrocast production. I want to thank our guests, Grace Chapman, Jake Flowers, Guy Lewis, and of course my co-host and our producer, David Tauzik. Executive producers are myself, Mark Netter, and my partner at Electrocast, Peter Rafelson. Along with producing, David does some editing, but our main editor is Marcus Campito, who slaves over these and does a fantastic job. Please join us on our next episode when we will wind the time machine back 60 years before Blue Velvet. That's right, to 1926, for Buster Keaton's action comedy, The General. Will our panel of young film lovers enjoy this wild train ride, or will they be pulling the emergency brake? Only place you can find out, right here on Film Generations.
Electrocast.